Hello, welcome to Podcast Cold Turkey. Bienvenue au Podcast Cold Turkey. Je prends quelques secondes pour vous dire que le podcast a besoin de vos encouragements sur les différentes plateformes de podcast. Donc, je vous encourage à aller mettre les thumbs up, les étoiles, les revues aussi, peut-être écrire juste un mot pour vous dire si vous avez aimé l'expérience, si vous avez apprécié le podcast. And the podcast needs a bit of your help. It would be just so appreciated of you to put the star rating, put a little review if you appreciate it, and you can actually share as well. Vous pouvez partager le podcast. Tout ça sera très apprécié. Et sans plus attendre, je vous laisse au podcast. Salut. Hey, Steven, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Alex. How about you?
I'm doing awesome. We just spoke, a bit before starting that, and you got me all fired up.
Great.
The first question is a twofold question. I asked the same freaking question to all of my guests for the past almost year now. So the first part is, where are you located on that big shiny blue planet? And the second half is, how has been the pandemic going for you so far?
Oh, those are two great questions. So I am located in Fort Worth, Texas, which, if you know where Dallas is, certainly
Yep,
you know where Texas is, right? That kind of helps
absolutely.
you narrow it down. And how has the pandemic been? It has been interesting, I would say. At best, there's been some goods and some bads, and I'm rolling with it.
Um, like a lot of the guests, and I'll let the audience. I will be discussing what we're going to be talking about tonight. But um, like a lot of my audience and a lot of my guests, the question was sometimes aiming towards the feeling of loneliness, isolation, depression, even like
Right.
some anxiety. I
Yep.
discussed with someone last week, not last week actually. It's going to be published last week, but I discussed with her yesterday, and I was telling her that it has been a while since I've gone out. I'm a sales representative. I used to be always on the road. So meeting with customers, shaking hands, attending meetings, attending exhibition showcases, all of that kind of stuff. Um, Last week was actually the birthday of a good friend of ours. So my wife and I went to one of the most upscale restaurants in Montreal. I couldn't wait to go there, and it was finally like just meeting, not necessarily meeting, but meeting outside. We've
Right.
invite a lot of people here, but it was kind of a new thing. Well, not new thing. My wife, went a lot to, went to some lunch and customer lunch and all of that stuff. But I'm more of the, I love being home. I don't mind being home. So it was pretty much one of the first time in a while that I haven't gone out. Well,
Right.
I had a phenomenal evening. When I got
Awesome.
out, um, I was trying to explain to my wife that it wasn't like a fear of going outside. It wasn't a fear of crowds or a phobia of crowds at all. They would, like the only way I could describe it was almost like a tingling in the back of my neck of something that I lost getting used to.
Mm.
Um, Something really, really weird, like that, like I could just understand, like, even if when I sat in my car on my way back home, there was like the shadow of a sigh of relief of going
Wow.
back in my home. And I freaked, I was like, wow, like I'm not the anxious type. I'm not the depressive type. I'm not the, like the manic type or whatever. But because I got used, or I got, almost meant forced, to, to stay home and, to not go out.
and I, like I do all of my shopping, the groceries, all of that shit. Like it had
Right.
nothing. Like it's not that. It's just that like I felt like like I said, like it was the shadow of relief of okay, I'm going back home. It's gonna be good. Like everything's gonna be fine.
That's awesome. And as you describe that, it makes me think about what it has been like. It's really hard to really say, in a shortened phrase, but I think that people by nature are generally social, and this has been like an antisocial experiment that we're going to have to figure out how to reacclimate to the real world, to being outside.
And I don't know how much Texas has handled the situation. Like I know that like Joe Rogan, biggest podcasters in the world, has moved to Texas. Like
Yeah,
because m- a lot of like motivation was actually because of that. Like kind of the like the safety measures and all that.
yeah.
Like his move was planned way ahead, but like that actually just fired him up. Um, so I don't know how Texas has handled like kind of but we were quarantined for about I'd say what, like not a year, but 8, 9 months, easy.
It's a long time. Yeah,
That's a long freaking
it's a
time, like
long
so.
time. Yeah,
And then it was okay. So you're not quarantined anymore, but um, you can have like no more than one guest, two guests, and then it was maybe you can be five outside, or maybe you can be two families, and like it was just a like a cluster f of like all kinds of rules and
yeah.
and which like I realized that like not being like sensible to that kind of shit, like it became um well, that the example of my dinner last week was wow, like I don't consider myself sensible to that, like just sensitive to that, um but I feel that, like so can you imagine someone that's prone to anxiety, that's prone
Oh,
to
I,
depression, or I mean nightmare, just a
oh,
nightmare.
yeah, absolutely. And that's really what I'm getting at. I know a lot of people like that, and it's kind of like forcing them deeper into themselves because while like I imagine somebody who's not really very openly social and they're hesitant to speak in public, but now they don't even have the opportunity to face that challenge. So when they
Yep.
finally go outside, it's like, okay, uh, now I got to do this. I mean, inside they want to do it, but I mean, it's just pushing. Life is slapping everybody in the face right now.
It is, and like if you haven't faced your demons, I mean this time was like you had pretty much had no choice, like or you were
Absolutely.
just like phenomenal at like just you were phenomenal at not facing shit, like
Right.
if you didn't get the opportunity to face yourself during these moments, I mean you'll never do it, like you'll just never do it.
You're totally right. Yeah.
The
Okay. Sorry.
no, go ahead, Steven.
No, I was thinking about also the flip side of that is now you're faced, many people with their families, like spending time with their families. I think months from now we'll be asking ourselves, did we make the most of this time? Whether we have a family or whether we don't, what did we do with this 18 months or whatever it turns out to be?
It is you're right, and it has like I've been with my wife for, well, we've been married for 9 years. Yeah, 9 years. So we've been together for 11 or
Congratulations.
12 years. Thank you. And it was this week, but I consider that period of time, like the last year and a half plus, to be one of the most challenging couple and parents um challenge like in our couple's life, like
Right.
it
Yeah.
it just is. It was at some point, and like communication saved it. Like we
Right.
have like that evening shower routine, like where like our son plays, like in the shower, and like we like we go all three of us are just like it's shower time, like so,
Right.
and kids young, and and sometimes we would just look at each other and it's like, oh shit, like it's tough.
It is. Yeah.
And like we would kind of mutually agree on that, like kind of
Right.
acknowledge that like it is really really rough, and we just and just move on, like the fact that we would just almost like I five our acknowledgement of how
Right.
challenging it is. We would be able to move on, like just say, okay, like you see it, I see it, awesome, let's go. um and sometimes it was her and sometimes it was me, like some
Yeah.
like just yeah, I mean, like crazy times, crazy times. um have you felt some of that or seen some of that, like kind of feeling, or even like to an extent, like some people you see, kind of embracing the depression state or the anxiety state?
Yeah, I've seen people driven into it, probably people that never have experienced it. I mean, I'll say even myself, I'm typically a very, positive minded, always looking at the bright side as much as I can. But this experience, I think the fact that it has taken so long and it's been so unpredictable, and that, people I know that were here, a couple of years ago, they're not anymore. I mean, it's put it in my face that mortality and even a level of control, we're actually somewhat limited,
Yep.
you know. And then I find myself again saying, okay, can I accept this? And if I accept it, what can I do within the bounds of this scenario? If I can't go outside, if my kid, especially I think about the kids, like you mentioned, man, early age, they want to go run around, now they can't. So what can we
Absolutely.
do with them to help them not fall deep into a depression?
It is like it's you're right, like especially for the younger ones, it is quite a challenging time. Like the I see my son as he's in kindergarten, like he's not like the mask is not mandatory for him, but
Right.
as early as first grade, so you see these 7 years old, 8 years old to like to like all of elementary school actually. Even like my son's teacher, like he hasn't seen the bottom of her face yet, like so
Right.
like it's just it's messed up, and like add this, like there's like an added layer of, like my son is on the spectrum. So
Right.
like all of this the subtlety of, like a wink or even a smile, and like or getting mad, or like you can't see it, like so
Right.
like and anyone on the spectrum has a hard time decoding that. Imagine when you're like you're kind of cutting off half of their face, like it's just
Yeah.
a freaking
Right.
nightmare, like
Yeah.
so
You lose the visibility on any
emotions.
emotions. Yeah. Right.
Yep. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. um okay. So, for anyone that listens, this week is going to be a bit different. And the reason is that, like Stephen, you know, has not gone through, like the heavy liquor, hard and tough roads that we sometimes have heard from some of my guests. Neither from what, we discussed has he gone through, like the heavy drug use and, like overcoming it. Like it's a bit of a different angle, but I think there are really some parallels to do with, like some of the resilience that Stephen has had to, like to and perseverance that he had to to actually live, like and to persevere and to just like just go full blown adds on. It is not life threatening in some instances of some of my guests, but like I found it quite interesting to have Steven this week because like he's had his own challenges. Again, like they're not life threatening. It's not about that. It really is about the attitude and how he has faced these challenges. And And yeah, like I want you, Stephen, just tell my listeners your story.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Alex, for that introduction. I think you set the tone real well because, like you say, my story is maybe not very dramatic, but it is something that a lot of people relate to, and it has to do with having difficulty with learning. Um, Actually, in school, as I grew up, school was pretty easy for me, but I always had a passion to play music, and piano in particular was my instrument of choice. But it was always difficult for me, and just through the years, I have struggled with playing piano, learning piano. And my story, I guess the interesting parts of it is that I ended up quitting piano for five times. And but the positive side of that is I ended up teaching myself piano and developing an easier way to help other people that want to learn music. A lot of people struggle with music, and now I'm able to help those people that are going through some of the same emotional issues I went through as I struggled with learning music.
So bring me back, Stephen, to kind of like the draw me a bit of the family portrait. Like the in terms of like where you like where you from, what's the like fraternity looks like in terms of brothers and sisters, parents,
Gotcha.
like
Yeah,
kind of the like set me up.
I will set you up. Yeah. So imagine, well, my lifestyle as a child, my mother, she was a single mother with four boys. And we actually left. I would say we left, but really we fled from California because my father, my birth father, he was a very violent person. So we ended up leaving, coming to Texas. That's how we got to Texas.
Okay.
And my mother's mother actually lived in Texas. So when she got us here, four boys, um, the challenges, I guess I was around 6 years old when we got here. And her challenge was keeping us off the streets, keeping us learning and growing and putting food in our mouths and things of that nature. So that's pretty much the setting for my childhood. Um, you know, and there in Texas, one of the things my mother always did, because she was by nature, she was a teacher and she was a lover of music also, not piano, but she wanted to occupy our time and mental energy with something that was positive. And one of those things was piano lessons. So she actually scraped up some money, found a local musician, and paid him. I'm sure it was just a little bit of money, but he took us under his wing and started teaching us how to play piano.
The all four of you guys?
All four of us.
Okay.
Yeah, one session, all four of us, all together at the same time.
How like so how old are you when that happens?
I was somewhere around 6 or 7 when I first started playing piano, learning piano. Not playing piano because there's a there's a difference between learning and playing.
Absolutely.
Right,
And it, I I learned piano myself. Like I'm in no way like a piano player, I'd say. Like but like I was actually introduced to piano really early by my parents. Felt forced into it for
right.
long. How did you feel about like being introduced to piano?
Same as you. At that point, I what I came to find out is that I like playing piano, but I didn't like learning it under the 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 strictness of what it typically is in a traditional lesson format. So she, because there's a lot of practicing that goes with it, and the discipline of it is absolutely good. And I always encourage people, like, if you're in a situation where you can learn in that format, excellent. I mean, you can't beat it if you are made for that type of format. But then again, what I came to find is not everybody is suited for that.
And there's a protocol, right? Like it, like if you want to, go through the conservatory and all that stuff, like there's
Absolutely.
it's a bit, like for people that don't know, like it's quite rigid, like like when they are like the most aligned with the conservatory and all that stuff, like it is it's not easy, like it's quite something. Um and so how does it go?
Well, that went somewhat well. I definitely learned some things. And the interesting thing though is, like I stated, I have three brothers. So there's four boys. My oldest brother is what I would call a natural at piano. I mean, to this day, from that day to this day, like he could sit down and just naturally. To me, it seemed natural. I'm sure there was more to it, but for me, it just wasn't that easy. For me, and maybe it was a mindset thing. I don't know. But again, thinking about it, I was very young, and the strictness of it, as you described, Alex. You got to sit up straight. Curve your hands in a certain way, and a lot of it was um, a lot of process. So, but despite that, what really ended my first set of lessons, because I did like some things about it, was my mother. She just couldn't afford it anymore. At a certain point, other priorities came into play.
um when, like when does it stop, like because you mentioned before we started recording that there was a few tries of, like
Yes.
how does it stop and when does it stop, like kind of the first
Right,
time?
right, right. So it stopped the first time because my mother, again, she couldn't afford to continue to support. It was us taking piano lessons was kind of like our swim lessons. Like it was something that she knew would be helpful and a light useful to our lives, but it wasn't useful to our livelihood. In other words, we need food and water, more than we or heat in the house more than we needed us to be taking piano lessons. So it ended pretty abruptly. We just pretty much had to stop. And if she got some more money here or there, she would we would pick it up again where we stopped off. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I ended up taking piano lessons 5 times, and through the ages, as a teenager, I took lessons again, and it was more at that time. It was more of me trying to, um, you know, record my own music. Yeah, kids go through phases. One of those things. Um, as an adult, again, I got a notion. Hey, I know a little bit about piano. Let me start up again. So I just went through that several times, and that's pretty much how that went.
At that point, like how, like was it, like kind of, like the some of the teachers telling you that, like it was, maybe you weren't fit for, or you weren't made for piano, or
Right. That didn't actually happen till I was really an adult, till I was probably in my 30s. Because when I got into my 30s trying to learn piano, it was more of a hobby. And yet the teacher's doing the right thing. They're like, hey, take this seriously, practice 30 minutes to an hour per day, and you're practicing what we call piano scales. You probably know what that is,
yep,
where you're going up and down the piano playing, not really playing songs, but you're building your muscles, I guess you could say,
yeah.
to be able to play piano, which is a good thing. It's just at that point my life was so, I'm living that adult life, and work work was at the forefront because I had to support a family. So yeah, I came face to face. My last piano teacher actually told me that. He's like, hey, you know, either you're gonna do it this way or you're not gonna get it. And he was nice about it, but he was being honest, um, and I, that's what that's the way that one went.
And the what kept you back to it, like was it like kind of more of the subconscious, um like what do you think that either like subconscious or conscious, there was a relation with the fact that your mom sacrificed a bit of her own
Hmm.
livelihood to like to provide you with that, like what do you
Yeah.
think there was a piece of that in there?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Alex. I think it's a piece of all of that. I think it's me knowing that my mother sparked this. She started this. I don't like to not finish what I start, so I think that's part of it. I got to be honest. There's a competitive spirit in me to a degree because, like I told you, my brother, I love him, but he's so good at it, and yeah, sibling. I don't know if you have brothers, but uh, there's a nature of comparison.
For
I
sure.
had,
And
yeah,
competition. Yep. And
yeah,
competition. Yep.
competition can be good, it can be bad. I can remember vividly some social gatherings where I'm at my brother's house. There's a crowd of friends, and he gets on there, man, and he just goes to town, do 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 do, just playing naturally. And then he turns around and he's like, "Hey, Steve can play too." So there I am. I'm on the spot, to perform. I didn't know that was going to happen, So, but that's the kind of prodding that actually kept me in it because, um, you know, underneath it all, I really love piano and I really love music. So going through all this difficulty to get to where I am today, to where I'm able to help other people that share my struggle, I view that as a real blessing. If this is all it had, if it took all of this to get me to here, then I'm very glad that I couldn't play at an early age. Because if it came easy to me, I wouldn't have developed what I have now to be able to help other people. If that
And
makes sense.
absolutely. And so what, like you just mentioned, develop something. What happened? Like what, like what did you do?
Great question. So the fifth time I quit piano lessons, I say I quit piano lessons, not piano, because you notice I keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Um, I pretty much sat down because at that point, as an adult, I'm in my 30s. I have a decent job. I bought this equipment, and I like it's something about it. I just like electronics, and I have a keyboard and speakers and stuff. Like I can figure this out if I just spend enough time. Um, and in my secular work for years, I've been a design engineer, and for me, I've trained a lot of people. I have managed a lot of teams, a lot of people on teams, and every time that I'm doing it, I'm going through a process of simplification. So when I sat down with the piano, I said, "Man, I'm beating myself over the head trying to do this a way that's not coming natural to me. Can I sit down and simplify this like I do build? We build buildings and things of that nature. So can I do the same thing with a musical instrument?" And it took me some years of I kind of call it peeling back layers of complexity to get down to the root of simplicity. So it took years of me doing that, and I finally, I made it. I got to where I got it to where I wanted to be.
So you actually sat and developed you became your own teacher.
Yes, I basically developed a method that worked for me, so that, and then I realized, hey, other people can use this. So it was all about, at first it was all about me. I'm like, man, you know what? I don't have time to study the books, and I don't even have time in my schedule to book an hour or even 30-minute session when I got all this crazy life happening. So I built something around my needs, which included, it's funny because there's kind of like a philosophy behind it too. It's acceptance of what my skills will allow me to do. So I'm not trying to be my brother. I'm not trying to be, one of the great, you name the great artists out there. I accept that I just want to play to have fun. I want to play piano for my own enjoyment. So that's part of the philosophy behind it. I don't want to pressure people into this. I've been on that side of it, and it didn't help me. Um, and if somebody needs that type of pressure or wants it, there's thousands of places to go get it. You know what I mean?
What was the intention, to be able to read the music, or to just play?
Just play. And that's a good point. It was not to read it because, to be honest, I can read sheet music right now and it took me going through this process to get to it, to get to that point to where I'm comfortable. I can sit down, I can play from a music book. But my goal was not to do that. My goal was not to study music theory. It was to play and enjoy and eventually record music and now it's to help other people.
And when did you realize that, like, what you had, quote unquote, created didn't exist anywhere else?
Oh, that's a great question. Great. I mean, you're doing this for a reason. Man, I scoured the internet in forums, YouTube, every avenue I could find because I knew what I was about to do. When I had the light bulb moment of simplifying piano to the point that I felt it was like so easy, I could walk up to a stranger, hand them a sheet of paper, and in a week's time they could turn around and play a jazz song or something, play their favorite song. When I felt like I had something like that, I looked everywhere for the same thing, digging on the rocks. And then eventually, when I really felt good about it, I hired a lawyer, an attorney, a patent attorney, to actually do some research, before I filed an application for a patent. And, it took some years, turning over stones, making revisions to the method. But finally, yeah, it came back good.
And uh, was there guinea pigs in, like, in your entourage?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And that's the funny thing because when I first put it out there, well, I didn't put it out there on the market, but I wanted to test it with one of my good friends that I know is not musically inclined. Like this guy never probably sit down at a piano. And so I hand him my method. I say, okay, man, look, I got something great. I know you can't play piano. Here, play. It was an eye opener there because it didn't work the way it wasn't as fluid as what it should have been. The experience, it just didn't go the right way. It started off. He played the first few pieces of the music with no problem, which you could say that's a win to take somebody who doesn't know anything about piano, sit him down, and in a minute's time, he's playing a few piano keys. But it didn't go well enough, in my opinion. So from there, I just started taking back data, trying other friends and family, and just getting results from them. And to this day, it's a living document the way I see it. It's a living method. It changes as I get more information about how to make it even better.
And that method doesn't involve continuous teaching from you.
That is correct. Yeah, because I want it to be so simple that they say, I want it so simple anybody can do it. A dog couldn't use it, so I don't want to use that analogy, but I literally want to make it so easy that a perfect stranger that has never played a piano can take my method and apply it, and in a week to a month, they can play several songs on their piano.
Hmm. Um, what would you say? Like, what is the biggest lesson in that whole journey? Like that we're talking about, like 20 plus years in busting your balls over learning piano. Like it's
Yep, yep. Well,
it's a bit of it. Like
yep,
it's a crazy journey.
it
What
is.
would what would you say be the biggest lesson out of that you can apply in your life, in your day to day life?
You're right. So this is where it brings me back to a grounded state because to me it's the resilience of and I'll say dedication to what I want to do. And in a sense, I needed to do this because like I said, in school, school came easy to me, and piano in a sense became my nemesis, or it was the one thing that was not so easy. Even basketball, I could play basketball pretty well, and things of that nature. But here was this one thing that was staring me in the face, and I wanted to do it so bad. And I've talked to people before, and they say, "Man, you quit piano 5 times." In the sense of, "Hey, you're a quitter. You just don't have the discipline to stick to it. If you would have just stuck to it, then you would have made it." Well, yeah, I mean that's true, probably, but I'm just like 80% of the people out there who take piano lessons and don't make it. So I'm really just a I'm living out an experience that I can to where I can help other people who have been through my same situation. So yeah, all these years, you're right. It's actually been 30 years because I'm 43, and it's well worth it. Like I said, I'm so glad piano did not come easy to me or come naturally to me, because I would just be a normal musician. And I'm not taking away from that. I would be, I wouldn't be able to help people. You know what I mean?
How do you apply that to fatherhood? How do you apply that to, like
Oh,
if
yes.
you're a father, like, or how do you apply that to, like even your relation
Yeah.
or your workplace, and like what has this developed in terms of acumen that you can apply elsewhere?
Oh man, it's multiplicitous. I mean, as a father, which I have an 8-year-old son named Lyndon. I love him so much, and I've learned how to let him learn in his own way. I want to give him the structure and the guidance that he needs, but I want to recognize that words can break a person emotionally, and they can also help. The tongue can be a sword, or it can be a soother, and I think there's a balance between pushing somebody in the right direction and encouraging them, and forcing them in a certain direction. So as a father, in a family sense, this has made me much more understanding or empathetic to that struggle. I think there are struggles that are unseen. Um, in other words, not in a mystical way or anything like that, but I just think that people need to be understood.
Yep.
And I take it like mathematics in the United States, for example, is taught one way, or 2 ways, or 3 ways. Well, lo and behold, I found out a few years ago that people in Japan, they do multiplication a total different way. And I can't remember the other places, but there are more. There's more than one way to do something, and who's to say that one way is better than the other?
And like it's funny because I had a Romanian teacher when I went, and I did some computer programming class, and there was a Romanian teacher there, and he showed us that I think they were 10 years old, or or fourth or fifth grade, and they were teaching, they were learning algebra that like even in high
Right.
school, late in high school, we haven't even had the chance to like to discover or to learn yet. And it was telling us, well, it's the approach is completely different. So you're absolutely right. Like what infuriates me even more, is that the fact that there's only one way to teach it, though therefore one way to learn it. um a failure under those this framework makes it that you're not good in math, right? Like,
Yeah.
or you're not
Right.
good in French, or you're not good in in English, or and so on and so forth. So that's where it gets more yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
makes
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's just I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry if I
No,
did.
go ahead.
Yeah, you're hitting right on it, and it's the singular way of thinking. There was a teacher. I don't know if she was in Texas or where she was. It might have been Texas. We have a reputation in some senses of being real strict about things, but she was actually teaching these kids math, multiplication, pretty deep, and she was having good results. until some of the parents found out that she was teaching them this alternate method of learning um, multiplication and things of that nature. And they complained so bad. And I can understand to a sense, parents need to be aware of what their children are being taught. But I do think that the balance is having an open mind about it.
Yep.
If is a certain subset of people that do not catch on in a traditional way, then what's wrong? Let's not leave them astray. Let's find something that maybe can help them to catch on.
Absolutely. Is your method available to like to open to the public?
It is actually on my website. Is probably the best place to go. It's called controlshiftpiano.com.
Okay.
And right, yeah, controlshiftpiano.com. And I named it that, Alex, very intentionally. You would be amazed at the kinds of names I came up with, but um, the meaning behind it is you need to feel like you're in control. And all through my life experience with piano, it was feeling out of control, feeling disoriented when I sit down at all those piano keys and not knowing what to do. That was the main thing. It was a psychological thing that got me and it had me stuck. So my intention now is to shift control, not to me, but to the person that wants to learn. So that's pretty much the meaning behind the website.
And in terms of like anyone listening, if you scroll down to the description of the episode, you can find all of the links that Steven's going to provide me. So no need to worry, no need to pause. Just like everything's going to be in there. Um, what like looking back, like what's the biggest lesson that you take out from like that, like that whole thing, like what because like we can translate that into like teaching ourselves like pretty much anything, right? Like if you
Yes.
just persist and like if you just keep on doing it and um like how do you like yeah and like what's the biggest lesson or what's the
Uh,
like what do you want to leave like
right.
the listener to like to have in mind by listening to that whole story?
Yes, sir. And I think that is it. I think you just stated it. It's that you really can do it. And somebody else cannot tell you what you can't do. If you don't believe that you can do something, look at what we call the Special Olympics, and you will see some people with what we call disabilities doing some extraordinary things that maybe there's a guy with no feet and he can run faster than someone who has all their limbs. We just sometimes need to think outside of the box and just don't accept that you can't do it. That's the main thing of what this is about. So now, Alex, I'm on a mission to not just help people play piano, but I feel like I have something that I'm building into a legacy that I can pass on to other people. Because I believe that this idea and this method is going to outlive me and it's going to help many other people who feel stuck. And that's what I'm most grateful about.
You know what, Stephen? That's a breath of fresh air, like for my podcast. So like it's
Thank
something
you.
different, but it's definitely something I can relate to. Like if it's not, like wherever you are and like that, even in your sobriety journey, like you're gonna be facing some like obstacles and challenges that you think like that you're not able, worthy of, like whatever, and like you just shown us in what that's by some would probably describe as like a less um let's call it a less life threatening obstacle in
Right.
in someone's life. um the persistence that you applied to it and the resilience that you applied to it is definitely something that I and anyone that listens can be inspired by. And so for that. I just, like I thank you to have dared, like just like proposing your like yourself as a, like as a guest, like it's like it took actually it took some balls, because like like you see my podcast description, like it's a, like we're a bunch of, myself included, by the way, like a bunch of addicts, like that overcomes their shit, and like we discuss that, and sometimes like it's like it's pretty much like like a scary story that people like
Right.
tells me and the listeners about, and and like you just you there just saying, well, you know what, like my story, I think it's worth it, and like you're goddamn right, it's worth it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Well, and that I agree, because I think we're all people, and at the core of who we are, we're all, in some ways we're all unique and different, but we're all the same. What affects one person in one way affects everybody else as well. So there's some relation, some intermingling of our existence if we look to find it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again for being there. Like I wish you all the success of, like the method that you've put out there. And it was a pleasure having you on, buddy. Like really.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. What a privilege and opportunity.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye bye.